Before American soldiers ever set foot on a European battlefield, Germany had already decided who they were, and that decision would become one of the Reich's greatest mistakes. In the late 1930s, as Europe slid toward war, German military thinking was shaped by history, geography, and ideology. Germany stood at the center of Europe, surrounded by rivals, hardened by centuries of conflict. War, to German officers, was not an abstract idea. It was tradition. It was preparation. It was destiny. America, by contrast, felt distant and irrelevant. To German planners, the United States was an industrial nation, separated from Europe by an ocean. It had no recent experience fighting a modern war against a peer enemy. Its army was small, its officers untested, and its population accustomed to comfort rather than sacrifice. German generals believed war created nations, and America, they thought, had never been truly tested. This belief was reinforced by Germany's early victories. Poland collapsed in weeks. France, long considered Europe's greatest land power, fell in just over a month. If France could be defeated so quickly, what chance did a distant democracy have? Within the Wehrmacht, confidence hardened into arrogance. German officers studied American society and saw weakness everywhere. Democracy meant debate, and debate meant hesitation. Individual freedom meant poor discipline. A culture built on consumer goods, entertainment, and comfort seemed incompatible with endurance and suffering. Nazi ideology added another layer. Propaganda portrayed Americans as greedy capitalists, racially divided, morally corrupted by Hollywood and money. According to this worldview, America lacked unity, purpose, and the will to endure heavy losses. Even American industry was misunderstood. German planners acknowledged that the United States could produce weapons, but they assumed quantity would never replace quality. They believed American soldiers would rely on machines because they lacked skill. Tanks, planes, and artillery were seen as substitutes for courage. This misunderstanding shaped strategic decisions. Germany never planned a war assuming full American engagement. Even after the U.S. entered the conflict, many German leaders believed America would take years to mobilize effectively. Years Germany assumed it did not need. In private letters, German soldiers mocked Americans openly. They imagined soft men arriving late to a war already decided. Men who would panic under fire. Men who would not last. What Germany failed to understand was this: America did not prepare for war the same way Europe did, but when it moved completely. And by the time Germany realized this, it was already too late. German misjudgment of America was not accidental, it was engineered. Inside the Third Reich, propaganda was not simply information, it was reality. Newspapers, radio broadcasts, speeches, and films repeated the same message. Germany was strong, disciplined, and united. Its enemies were weak, decadent, and divided. America became a perfect target. German propaganda painted the United States as a nation obsessed with money and pleasure. Soldiers were portrayed as mercenaries, fighting not for survival or homeland, but for profit. This idea comforted German troops. It suggested Americans would lack the moral strength to endure hardship. Hollywood films were mocked as evidence of moral decay. Jazz music was labeled chaotic and primitive. American racial diversity was weaponized in propaganda, portraying the country as unstable and divided. This narrative served a purpose. It reassured German soldiers that their enemy lacked unity. It suggested American troops would break under pressure. And most dangerously, it convinced German commanders that America was not a serious military threat. Reality was filtered through ideology. German intelligence reports that challenged this view were often ignored. Training improvements, industrial capacity, and logistical planning were downplayed. What mattered more was what fit the story Germany told itself. But propaganda has limits. When German soldiers finally encountered Americans in combat, they discovered a truth ideology could not hide. Americans did not fight for ideology, but they fought with confidence. They did not seek sacrifice, but they endured it. And every day of fighting made the propaganda ring more hollow. By the time German soldiers began questioning the narrative, they were already losing the war. When German soldiers first encountered American troops in combat, they believed they were watching an army prove every stereotype correct. Early battles seemed to confirm everything German propaganda had promised. American units hesitated under pressure. Communications broke down. Attacks lacked coordination. Inexperienced officers made costly mistakes. German veterans, hardened by years of fighting, interpreted this as weakness. To them, this was how an inferior army behaved. German doctrine placed enormous importance on psychological collapse. Break the enemy's confidence, disrupt their chain of command, and the battle would end quickly. That approach had worked against Poland, France, and countless smaller forces. German soldiers expected Americans to react the same way. But something deeply unsettling soon became apparent. The Americans did not withdraw permanently. They did not collapse. They returned. Where German soldiers expected panic, they saw reorganization. Where they expected retreat, they saw renewed pressure. Defeated American units were pulled back, reinforced, retrained, and sent forward again, often within days. This behavior confused German commanders. In European warfare, defeat often meant exhaustion. Losses reduced fighting spirit. Units dissolved slowly under constant pressure. But American forces behaved differently. Losses did not signal failure. They triggered adjustment. German soldiers began noticing patterns that did not fit their expectations. American artillery appeared with startling speed. Once American observers identified German positions, massive fire missions followed. Barrages were not occasional, they were systematic. Precision increased with each engagement. Survivors quickly learned that staying in one position too long invited destruction. Even more disturbing was American air support. German troops had grown accustomed to fighting without fear of constant aerial attack. But with American involvement, the sky became dangerous. Fighter bombers appeared suddenly, attacking roads, supply lines, and troop concentrations. Movement during daylight became risky. American units fought with what Germans described as careless confidence. Soldiers joked under fire. Officers moved openly. Attacks continued despite losses. This behavior was often mistaken for recklessness, but it masked a deeper truth. The Americans trusted their system. They trusted that artillery would respond, that air support would arrive, that wounded men would be evacuated, that supplies would keep coming. This trust allowed them to fight without the fear that haunted German troops as the war dragged on. German veterans later admitted that American unpredictability was terrifying. They did not fight like the British. They did not fight like the Russians. They did not fight like the Germans. They fought as if failure was temporary. By the time of Italy and Normandy, German soldiers no longer spoke of American weakness. They spoke of American pressure, constant, grinding pressure that never seemed to stop. The battlefield had delivered its verdict. If the battlefield shocked German soldiers, American industry shattered their remaining illusions. Germany had prepared for a short, decisive war. Even as the conflict expanded, German strategy relied on conserving resources, managing shortages, and extracting maximum value from limited production. America fought a different war entirely. To American planners, war was not a test of endurance. It was a logistical problem to be solved. Factories were expanded, repurposed, and multiplied. Civilian industries transformed into engines of destruction at a scale Germany could not comprehend. German intelligence knew America produced a lot. What they did not understand was how that production would be used. American losses did not weaken the army. They activated the system. Destroyed tanks were replaced. Downed aircraft were rebuilt. Worn units were rotated out and re-equipped. Ammunition shortages, so common in German units, were almost unknown among Americans. German soldiers noticed this quickly. Every destroyed American vehicle seemed to be replaced by two more. Every defeated unit returned stronger. Artillery ammunition was expended without hesitation. Firepower replaced caution. This was deeply unsettling. German doctrine valued efficiency and bravery. American doctrine valued overwhelming force. If artillery could solve a problem, it was used. If air power could reduce risk, it was applied. American soldiers were not expected to sacrifice themselves unnecessarily. To German soldiers raised on ideals of endurance and heroism, this felt unfair. They were fighting men. Americans were fighting systems. By 1944, German commanders openly admitted that victory was no longer possible. Even perfect tactics could not overcome infinite replacement. Germany was bleeding. America was renewing. Factories, not battlefields, now decided outcomes. German soldiers began referring to America not as an enemy nation, but as an unstoppable machine. A machine that did not tire. A machine that did not run out. And no amount of courage could stop it. P. In the final months of the war, German soldiers reached a grim clarity. They had not been defeated because they lacked bravery. They had not lost because they lacked skill. They had lost because they misunderstood the nature of their enemy. Germany believed war was about suffering longer than the opponent. America believed war was something to be finished as efficiently as possible. This difference shaped everything. American soldiers did not fight with desperation. They fought with expectation. Expectation of rotation. Expectation of survival. Expectation that the war would end and life would continue afterward. German soldiers increasingly lacked this belief. As defeat approached, morale collapsed. Units fought without hope. Orders felt meaningless. Sacrifice no longer promised victory, only death. In contrast, American soldiers continued advancing methodically. They trusted the future. That trust became their greatest strength. This psychological gap explains a final, telling detail. By 1945, many German soldiers actively sought surrender to American forces rather than Soviet ones. Not because Americans were weak, But because they were predictable, they followed rules, they fed prisoners, they treated the wounded, they represented survival. This alone revealed how completely Germany had misjudged America. The nation Germany dismissed as soft proved resilient. The army Germany mocked proved adaptable. The enemy Germany underestimated proved decisive. Germany lost the war not only on the battlefield, but in its imagination. And by the time that realization arrived, there was nothing left to do but surrender.